Hello and welcome to the 24th episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. Since last week's episode, we've reached over 560 YouTube subscribers. So as always, a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in. If you like what we do, please like, share and subscribe. Comments also give us a big boost and we always respond to each one. If you're only here for Thistle the Cat shorts, stick around, you might decide you like rugby too.
A reminder to check out our Substack, where we've just done a deep dive on all the key stats for every single URC team, what makes them tick and what their main weaknesses are. We are now also on TikTok, so if you want all of our short form content, whether it's shorts or the little mini docs that we make, you can find those on there. And give us a follow, give us a comment, give us a like, and thank you very much in advance. But now we need to introduce this week's wonderful guest. It is us finally ticking off the last of the URC nations in Scotland. You may know her as a maker of candles. You may also know her as the maker of the famous Celtic conspiracy mug, which I have here. She is the Scottish Rugby fan, MissilePanda, aka Leslie. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Very excited.
Thanks for coming on, Leslie.
Shall we kick off with our moment of the week? And Ender's got something he wants to boast about for his moment of the week.
Yeah, I'm just going to boast and be that guy. First time I've done it, to be fair. But basically, I'm in a Super Brew Predictor League. And at one stage over the weekend, so this is for the Investec Champions Cup, at one stage over the weekend, I hit number 1 in Ireland, which is pretty cool. I'm now in 3rd, unfortunately. And I hit 39th globally. So that was pretty exciting. And first in the Heineken Cup Predictor League that our mate Kaelon set up. So yeah, that's my boast of the week. I wasn't there for long, obviously. But yeah, that was the highlight of my weekend.
Picking Munster to lose every week is really paying off for you.
Yeah, it is tough putting down that Connacht may lose. But I predicted a Connacht victory this weekend, and thankfully that was one of my one of the ones I got right. But that's enough for me. Hugh, what was your moment of the week?
So my moment of the week, it was a rugby moment, and it's just watching the whole of Bordeaux Burglar versus Bulls, or Bulls versus Bordeaux at Loftus. A great game. I had really high hopes for it. Yes, there was 1 or 2 stars missing from both sides, but it was a fantastic game. Really high intensity, really high skill level. It got a bit silly at one point, which we'll talk about later, just lots of tries going in, but it was a real feast of rugby. And I think Harlequins Ulster was on at the same time, and I was like, why would you choose that game? I'm watching this game. I loved it. So yes, that was my moment. Leslie, what was yours?
Not a good one, but my bad moment is probably poor Adam Hastings is out of the Scotland team again with injury. Poor guy cannot catch a break. I think this is his 3rd time or something in 18 months he's been injured. So just I listened to a podcast with him through the week, and he was like so excited to be back playing, and poor guy is injured at the weekend and now out of the Scotland team.
Yeah, he's just done a big interview, hasn't he, as well? I think in one of the written papers about how he's finally broken his injury curse and spoke too soon, very sadly.
Yeah, last game before, or second last game rather. But yeah, real shame. We're a bit sitting on the ground at 10.
Yeah, you have to scour the globe.
It's good news for someone like Ben Healy.
Yes, yeah, I think he'll likely be the backup now. No competition for him so much.
Yeah, if he can actually get onto the bench and like he did in the World Cup. But yeah, fingers crossed. He's been a hell of a player in the URC so far. Yeah. So anyway, let's go on to our bit of news. So Matt Harley on Twitter has been his big thing, a bit like our big thing, is rugby attendances. And he's been tweeting today, he did a piece in City AM about how attendances for European Cup are up compared to last year. A lot of the English clubs are up slightly, but teams like the South African teams and Bordeaux in particular are up thousands upon thousands, giving the competition a real boost. I guess, Leslie, were the rumours of European rugby's demise greatly exaggerated? Have we all been proved wrong?
I wonder if it's not just obviously South Africans joining us, but the fact that we're out of COVID not out of COVID, but restrictions have been out for a little while now. People are maybe getting back to going out, a bit more money. No one's on furlough anymore, and bit more of a chance to see some. There's been some good contests too, some good matchups of teams. So, and I know the format hasn't been loved by many, especially on X this week, but there's been no dead rubbers. So, people have been sending out their good teams. So there's maybe been a bit more in it than we might have seen in the past.
Yeah, more of occasion, I guess. What about you, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's really good because all I remember reading, especially on broadcast rights, was post World Cup there was going to be this big drop off in viewership and attendances at all major competitions, and I know with the Prem domestically, like it didn't do so well at the beginning of the season, but it does seem like, especially over that festive period, that those attendances were up. We know URC attendances are up again. Top 14 games set out every weekend, and now we've seen the big increase in European Cup games. I think it's brilliant. Like, I know it's easy, I think, sometimes to get sucked into the debate of which league is better than the other or whatever, but I think it's great that European rugby as a whole and South African rugby seems to be thriving, especially attendance wise, since the World Cup. I think that's just really impressive. And now we've got the Six Nations coming up. We've got the documentary coming out tonight/tomorrow. I think it's really healthy, and with all the talk as well about, and you see plenty of this on Twitter about English fans and maybe some French fans, and I think the minority probably of Scottish, Irish, and Welsh fans who maybe aren't the biggest fans of European or of South African involvement in the European competition. I think it's proved that, well, fans certainly, the fans attending those stadiums don't have anything against that, and they're showing up, which I think is really important. But yeah, as Leslie touched on, we can talk about the format another day, and it's not perfect, but it's just, for me, it's a great news story that people are coming back to stadiums. What about yourself, Hugh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to recognise as well the Irish fans' contribution to this, because you hear the stories of like 3,500 Munster fans going to Toulon, and despite Munster's not great performances this year, with all of the context to that like the figures they're getting at Thomond Park and things like that are absolutely huge viewing figures in attendances for rugby. So I think and obviously Leinster have really been turning in the big attendance figures for several years now. I mean, like, to be fair to them. So yeah, and the South Africans seem to be buying into the competition a bit more. Obviously, it's new to them, and we speak to them. We're lucky enough to speak to some South African rugby fans quite regularly, and they are still wrapping their head around it because it's a completely foreign concept to them. But they are getting there, and who knows if they start going deep into these competitions. I mean, I posted my win rates of each nation so far, and South Africa have the highest win rate in Europe of any nation so far. So that's not to be sniffed at. I mean, even the Cheetahs have gotten through to the knockouts of the Challenge Cup, which we'll talk about later. So yeah, a rising tide lifts all ships, and yeah, it's good to see after a lot of the doom and gloom that we had, particularly over the World Cup. In some countries, to be fair, I'm sure there's a lot of countries who'll be listening thinking there was no doom and gloom over here. So yeah, it's just nice to have a bit of a good news story knocking around at the moment. Some other news that has broken in the last 24 hours. We kind of knew about it previously. Owen Farrell's move to Racing 92 has been confirmed, a 2-year deal. He is the latest big name fly half to move to the French capital, following the likes of Finn Russell, Johnny Sexton, Dan Carter, and others. Leslie, what do you say to this? Is this it felt like a huge shock when it was initially broken a few weeks ago. Is it fair to say most people are kind of like on board with it at this point?
I think so. It changes the good rest and all that. He's been at Saracens for 16 years or something like that, since he was 18 or something like that. It's a long time in one place. And from what we've heard from people who've been at Racing, our Finns and things like that, he seems to have loved the club and the environment. So good on him. I hope he gets what he's looking for from it. It'll be different, I'm sure, but I hope it's the break and from English rugby and English media that he is hoping for. I think it's a good move for him. I hope it's great.
Yeah, do you want to come in on that, Ender?
Yeah, and it'll just be with the Six Nations obviously just right around the corner. It's going to be fascinating watching England now and seeing how they adopt and who they'll have, how they adapt, I should say, and who they'll have in at 10. Will it be Marcus Smith? It'll just be really fascinating to see. And just, yeah, fair play to him for making the move. The interesting part is now, obviously, that Racing are looking to potentially offload a good few players now because they're getting close to their salary cap. They're probably at their salary cap, so they're going to have to offload. So there'll be some serious talent, I'd say, out there, which is another interesting take. And they'll be reunited with Stuart Lancaster, after all those years. But yeah, I was initially very, very shocked because he does seem like a one-club man. He's Mr. Saracens. He was England captain, but yeah, it's probably going to be great for his mental health, which is probably the most important thing. But yeah, we're going to miss him in Six Nations, but that's fair play to him.
Well, just from the England point of view, the news broke today that Ollie Lawrence is out of the Six Nations injured, which is a huge blow to England. And with Tuilagi out and Farrell not available, making himself unavailable, who's now going to play inside centre for England? It's going to be someone very new, very untested. So yeah, it's they're going to start missing him quite badly quite soon, I think. And I do believe that he was England's Johnny Sexton in terms of the impact it was when he wasn't there as much as when he was there. Alan Wynne-Jones was the same for Wales for a time as well. So yeah, I think what is it? Passing makes the heart grow stronger, something like that. I think there'll be a lot of us, not just England fans, everybody who will start missing Owen Farrell pretty hard pretty soon. Right, so let's have a bit of a chat about Scottish rugby then. That's why we've got Leslie on. So I've said a few horrible things about Scottish rugby, and I'm not sorry. But Leslie is here with her power of reply to tell us why I'm so wrong today and why I should be sorry. So let's just talk about, Leslie, your experience as a fan. So you did a fantastic thread a few weeks ago talking about, when we rugby and its whole grow the game thing. You are quite new to maybe not international rugby, but you're quite new to club rugby. So do you want to talk us through kind of your journey and how you've come to rugby a bit later in life, maybe?
So I always watched international rugby. So whenever Six Nations comes round, I would always watch it. I probably knew maybe half a dozen of probably the Scotland players at the time who would be playing. Couldn't really tell you anything about, who was in front row or anything like that. I might know some of the backs, but so I always watched it with my dad. We used to sometimes go to either a Six Nations game or an autumn test. And it wasn't until lockdown, COVID and all that I kind of got into podcasts, and I thought, well, I'll try and maybe get a couple of rugby podcasts. Found I think it was a Rugby Pod at the time, and thought, oh, that's quite funny. They talk a bit about the Prem, and I thought, okay, that's quite good, but I'm maybe a bit more interested in Scottish rugby rather than the Prem. So I started seeking out Scottish rugby podcasts and found Scottish Rugby Podcast, the guys over there, and they're quite funny and it's not too serious, so you kind of get swept along and the chat, and obviously they're talking about Edinburgh, Glasgow every week and different players, and I thought, well, I'm hearing about all these people, I should maybe check out some of these games so that when they're talking I have a kind of understanding about what they're talking about. I kind of got into it from there. So I think I signed up for Viaplay and started checking out some Edinburgh games because they're my closest team, probably closer than Glasgow. So kind of went from there really, and I've pretty much followed Scottish rugby professional game since then. So yeah, try and catch a game every week if I can, and at least one of Glasgow or Edinburgh if I can, depending on when it's on and all that. And so yeah, that's kind of how I found rugby later in life. For me, it was very much a kind of social thing when you're kind of locked down. You've got, you're not friends, but they're people having a chat. You feel like you're part of it. So that's kind of how I came to it. So I didn't come through club rugby or didn't know anyone who played. Wasn't involved in any teams or anything like that. Never played myself. Didn't even realise women's rugby was a thing until probably a few years ago. So yeah, bit late to rugby, but we got there in the end.
And you spoke in your thread a little bit about rugby's constant struggle to attract new fans and how they've kind of had a few missteps along the way, maybe in the mainstream media, particularly in the UK, of how to do that. So what do you make of the way that rugby goes about trying to attract new fans? And do you think that some of the efforts that they put together is what attracted you, or do you think you kind of came to rugby in spite of some of those things?
I think a lot of the rugby media worries far too much about stuff that new fans don't care about. So we see, you guys will see it on X and Twitter all the time, like, oh my God, there's too much kicking, or oh my God, this kick battle lasted a whole 30 seconds in a 8-minute game or something like that. And yeah, if you're a new fan, if you've never seen it before or you're fairly casual to it, these things don't matter. It's just you're watching it for the whole thing, the whole spectacle. 30 seconds of kicking is not, going to stop somebody from watching if they're interested. So especially, people like Squidge kind of do a good job of explaining, like why kicking's not bad. So stuff like that I found really good and helpful. So that when you're watching a game and there is a bit of a kick battle, they're trying to gain territory or force the other team into a mistake. It's not necessarily just this is a kick battle. They're kicking it to each other for fun kind of thing. But the media seems to have this kind of hand-wringing of everything that rugby does must be bad. It seems to want to beat itself up all the time, and that it can't possibly attract new fans if there's too much kicking or there's too many scrums. Or I just don't think that's the case. If you're new to rugby and you're watching a scrum, you're like, oh, I don't really know what's happening, but it's quite exciting. Maybe the scrum has collapsed a couple of times, but if you've got someone that you can kind of refer to that's maybe a bit more knowledgeable to explain to you why, one team got the penalty, one didn't, that kind of thing. You're not questioning so much why it's happening, or you don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. You don't have any baggage that comes with it.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned scrums, Leslie, because like I spent a lot of time in America, and like any of my friends or anybody I knew who watch rugby or knew anything about it, like they'd love the scrum and they'd want to know more about it. People who are who are getting into rugby or they've some sort of interest, they want to understand the scrum. They don't want to see less scrums. Like they love it. They love the idea. It's not something you see in other sports necessarily. So like it's unique, and I think it should be celebrated. And just like the kicking as well, instead of just maybe criticizing it, why don't we just analyze it during the game, instead of just complaining or just saying kick tennis, foot tennis, whatever. And you're so right about those. This is definitely one of the gripes of mine, especially in terms of scrum time, when you have those collapsed scrums. Use that time to analyze why that scrum collapsed. Let's do a little player profile. Why did it collapse? Like, there are so many interesting facets I think you can hone in on it, and it will get people interested. And one final point I'd just like to make on this as well, and it's so interesting that you brought it up, is just like some broadcasters and commentators who will be, and former players who openly are like employed by these broadcasters and then just complain about not understanding the scrum or saying there are too many resets or there's too much kicking. And again, for me, that's just time that can be used to analyze and to focus and pretend like you're interested, I guess. But just one final thing, actually, Leslie, and this maybe isn't something we discussed beforehand, but like we hear a lot about growing the game and getting people in, and there's this whole piece, I think, around, we should focus on the players, their personalities, their life outside of rugby, their social media presence. Is that where you kind of see, is that how you would see the sport growing, or is it more just maybe focusing on what makes rugby unique? Like, just because I know you're always kind of interested, especially international game, but what do you think really got you hooked? I know you mentioned COVID and having all that extra time, but like, is it a bigger social media presence from players, or what is it, do you think, from your experience?
Yeah, I think it would help. I mean, the Scotland squad was announced fairly recently, like all the teams, and do we really know much about them? Probably not. We don't know what their personalities are like. We maybe see them a few minutes or at the end of a match if someone's won player of the match award. We hear a fairly generic piece from them. I think not that you necessarily want to be like all sports, but if you can get somebody interested in a particular player or players, there's a reasonable chance that they'll follow them as they go around different clubs. And I obviously I'm Scottish. I knew Finn Russell, so when he went to Racing, I knew Finn played there. So I'll try and watch a few games so that I can see Finn play. So that you have a kind of understanding of how he's playing in terms of the wider Scotland team. Now that he's moved to Bath, I caught the Bath game this weekend. I wouldn't normally watch the Prem, but because he's there, I'm interested to see how he plays and how he does in that environment. And I'd love to see a bit more about different players and their personalities, but we don't really see it. And when we do hear them speak, it's very prescribed, very not corporate, but very sanitized kind of. We don't really see much. I think the women's game's a lot better at those personalities rather than the men's game. They don't give anything away, and maybe they don't want to because of backlash or something like that. But I think it would be good. It gets people in. People are interested in other people.
Yeah, I think it's just the reason that they don't do that. Some kind of weird old money pride thing. The reason that men's rugby doesn't do those things is like, oh, we're above that sort of thing kind of attitude.
It's a bit British, isn't it? It's like, we don't talk about ourselves. We don't put ourselves out there.
So talk us through some of the things about like in the women's game that you found really appealing then, or you thought were particularly good. Because I completely agree. Like, I know like Wales women's team has done some great stuff. Like England's women's team, like for someone who is supposed to be anyone but England, every time I see a bit of content with the England women's team, I'm like, will you stop being so bloody likable? I'm trying to hate you over here. Right. So what for you did the women's team do better?
So their behind the scenes content, I think, is a lot better. We see a lot more personalities and a lot more fun than we do in a lot in the men's game. They're much more willing to be themselves, and Scotland girls often do sort of games and things on TikTok, and they'll do dances and things like that, which we're not going to see big two-hand doing dances on TikTok. Also, the interviews I find that the women give, we hear a lot more information about how they're actually feeling about the game, and it feels very real. Rachel Malcolm, Scotland captain, used to do the official Scottish podcast. I don't know if she still does, but she often speaks very eloquently about the team, and how much it means to her playing for the team, and if they've had a loss, and how that's affected her. We just don't see that so much in the men's game. They'll say, oh yeah, it's a bad loss, but we don't really hear them eloquently speak about how they actually feel. It's very sanitized. So they're much more free. They don't seem to have this kind of baggage that maybe the men have. They're just happy to be themselves, and I think that's great. You get involved in the personalities. That's what you want to see. You want to see people enjoying their environment, having a good time. That's what. And then if you're interested in particular players, again, it feeds back into you watch them play because you've seen them.
Yeah. Okay then. So, do you want to come in there, mate? Sorry.
I was just going to mention, I know Munster, now I've never actually accessed any of this content, but they have that, they sell their monthly subscription. I think it's like £4 a month. It's called Access Munster, and they do a load of behind the scenes content, and Munster fans are always raving about it. But I think that's exactly what they get to see. They get to see their players just be themselves and just having a laugh in the background, going to training and doing all these different things. I think that it's stuff like that, I think, which will help grow. Although Munster was like, they could put Anton out and I think their fans would subscribe to it, wouldn't they? Because they have such a loyal following. But I think content like that is probably touching on that as well, which is great at an affordable price, and you just get to know the players more. And I think, and I know we're going to talk about it later, but with the Six Nations piece coming out, you know, on Netflix, I think that could be something that will help the sport, because you'll obviously get to see more of the players, and we'll learn more about their personalities.
There'll be someone who's not very well known right now, who in 24 hours will be the most talked about rugby player in the Northern Hemisphere. That's kind of cool to think about it. So what you guys are talking about, I think we're seeing a great example of it in Welsh rugby at the moment, where you've got a team like the Ospreys, who are going really hard on their fan connectivity, and their fans are really loving it. They're not quite doing like behind the scenes stuff, although if they did do more of that, then I'm sure that the fans would buy into it, because they've got such a great feeling. And then you've got a club like the Scarlets, who are very Iron Curtain with the keeping the gap between the players especially and the fans, which, you know, on Scarlet's Fever we're working to break down. But yeah, I think it's interesting to draw that conclusion. I completely agree with that, every thing that both of you have said. So anyway, so let's talk about just the feeling generally about Scottish rugby now, because in the old best league over here, Glasgow and Edinburgh are both in the top 5. Now, Glasgow have been in and around the top of the URC for a while, but Edinburgh, not necessarily so. How many times have Edinburgh made the playoffs? It's not many, is it?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. Once, maybe, that I'm aware of, but yeah, it's not often. Not compared to Glasgow, anyway.
No, but it's a hell of a team that Edinburgh have got now, and they're going really well.
They should be going better for the players they have, I would think. You've got, you know, Boffelli, Duhan, Darcy, Wes Gustenfier's pretty good, but we don't seem to be harnessing them very much at the moment. But relatively new coach, not been here all that long, going to take a little bit of time to get people playing how he wants them to play. Plus a new 9-10 partnership as well this year. So it definitely doesn't feel Edinburgh clicking as they should yet. It feels very much a work in progress. They've had some wins that Ben Healy has dragged them through himself with his boot, but I love them dearly, but I'm not convinced by them at the moment. Just for the team they have, they should be up there. You know, especially over the last couple of seasons, up there in the URC. They're just not. Glasgow going pretty good.
Yeah,
they're doing a lot better.
Yeah, so Glasgow had a really, really, really strong start to the season. I think they went undefeated in the whole of November, but they've had a bit of a wobble lately. Would you put that down to? Is it just a blip, or
they've had a few injuries in the back row, which I think have played a big part in, and they've not had Jack Dempsey or Matt Fagerson for, you know, they hadn't had them out for a good few weeks. They had George Horn out for a good few weeks as well, and it still managed to scrape through some wins. But they've now got Matt Fagerson back and Jack Dempsey. You know, pretty good ball carriers, which I think they were kind of missing when they were out. Glasgow have also played pretty much everyone in the top 5 now, I think. So everyone they've still to play is our beloved Welsh teams and our Italian teams. You would hope they would continue to pick up some wins there. So I think Glasgow are probably the better prospect for the rest of the season compared to Edinburgh. I don't think we'll see them, because I think they've still got South African teams to play away, which doesn't fill me with the greatest of confidences.
Yeah, and tell me about how Glasgow play and their game plan? Because I was reviewing some stats, and Glasgow are rock bottom of the URC in terms of kicking stats, which is quite weird because they're obviously third in the league, and we're always told like the team that kicks the most usually wins. But Glasgow hardly ever kick. So how does that work? What have they gamed the system? Have they discovered the decodification of rugby?
They've got, I think, two things to their they've got a very good rolling maul. So if you've got it, you're going to use it. I think anyway. Why reinvent the wheel? If this is your maul is really good at working against the big teams, keep doing it. I'm also not sure about the kicking abilities of some of the backline in Glasgow, as in their accuracy. So I wonder if that's why they don't kick as much. They don't have the accuracy maybe that they maybe need to do that.
They're looking to bring in. Yeah, they're looking to bring in a new number 10, aren't they? Because they haven't got like a star 10. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. They've got Tom Jordan, who's playing 10, but probably a 12. But with Sione and Hugh, Stafford McDowell, he's probably only game time he's getting is 10 at the moment. Ross Thompson was out injured for a long time. Just came back and then was injured again. So he's been out for a long time, and it's going to take him time to kind of get back to where he was. I know he's had a couple of bench spots, but yeah, they don't have a real great 10. So I don't know if they're looking for one, to be honest, but they could certainly do with one, even just for goal kicking accuracy.
Well, they got Boff now. Boff's no, that's Edinburgh. Sorry,
no,
Edinburgh. Yeah, I was getting confused because mad that Edinburgh had Buffelli and Kinghorn. Like, I thought it was just Toulouse is supposed to hold fullbacks. Anyway, so do you think Edinburgh will hang on to that playoff spot? Do you think this is their year?
No, I don't. No, I don't. Just because they've got some probably tougher games coming up. I'm just not sure if they're quite clicking enough yet for them to win those games, unfortunately. Obviously, I would love it. It would be great, but I think it's too early on in their new coaching setup. I think it'll need another season to probably really kick on. I think they've got some injuries too. I don't see it. Plus, we're going to have a load of guys out with Six Nations and things. They'll have rest time probably when they come back. So relying on squad guys, academy guys, and I just don't know if Edinburgh have the same depth that Glasgow do to handle that. But yes, I would love it, but I don't think we'll see it this year.
Okay, well that's us talking about Edinburgh and Glasgow's men's teams, but of course they now have women's teams playing in the Celtic Challenge, which is something that you and I have conversed about several times that we're both enjoying.
Yes.
What have you made of the Celtic Challenge so far? Have you been enjoying it, and what's your just general thoughts of the competition so far?
So I watched it last year, and it was the first year, which was not easy to find. And this year, with Edinburgh and Glasgow now having their own teams and being aligned with the men's team, from a Scottish rugby perspective, makes an awful lot of sense when there's already a recognised fan base there. The games have been pretty good. The first game between Edinburgh and Glasgow I thought was great. I thought Edinburgh really good. They've got a standout player in Briar McNamara. She's very good, great boot on her, number 12.
Is she the one with the funny nickname?
Oh, I don't know if she has what.
Someone.
Does she have a nickname?
One of the Scottish players has got a funny nickname. I can't remember what it was. Come back to it. Carry on speaking.
So and last year, the Welsh and Irish girls, it was very much a development competition, so we didn't really see as many international stars that we're seeing in the Irish and Welsh teams this year. So it's been a lot harder, but this league was meant to be a development between club rugby and a stepping stone to international. So playing against your Alex Calendars and things is probably doing all the teams involved a lot of good, I would say. Been some great games, some pretty close games. Yeah, it's been good. I'm looking forward to coming back this weekend, I think, or is it next weekend? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's this weekend. It is, yeah.
Back
And then we're
this
into
weekend,
then we're into the weird playoff thing that no one understands.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Edinburgh have been getting good crowds, haven't they? They keep I have to say, Edinburgh's social medias have been doing a great job of promoting the team.
Yeah. So I think the Glasgow and Edinburgh game had about 2,000 people there, or just under.
That's fantastic.
I mean, we're not seeing that at some of the men's games in URC, so if it's not a great fixture. So to be getting that is great. And the following weeks, I think Edinburgh and Glasgow both had just under 1,000 each when they were both playing at home. For girls who are not professional, and this is their first time playing in this competition as Edinburgh and Glasgow, I think you can't complain at those kind of numbers. Yeah. It's going to take time, but I think it's been great. Great to see some girls I've seen before, coming through age grade Scottish rugby now playing for these teams. It's been great to see.
Yeah, we'll just touch on that age grade stuff in a second, but something else we've spoken about is the experience of using RugbyPass, which is something that we talked about on this pod. When it came out, Enda was doing a lot of research into what it's been like. What's your experience using RugbyPass TV so far?
It has been awful. So even at home, you can watch anything on the telly, no problem. Don't really have any interruptions, but RugbyPass will pause, it will buffer all the time. That's if you can find the games, that's if they start on time. We had that. I think it was the first Irish ladies game in the Celtic Challenge. Didn't start till like 30 minutes into the game, which is just such a bad look for this new competition. It's not been enjoyable, and I think unless you're a really dedicated fan, you're going to give up on that fairly quickly. It's just not particularly good to use, or particularly intuitive, I don't think, for some people. Yeah, not a great user experience.
Yeah, it's the game clock not stopping when the referee stops the clock that's really been messing with me, and you got no idea how long is left of the game.
Yeah, I don't know if some of that is because the local broadcaster, whoever's the home game is running this effectively, and RugbyPass are just getting the stream, but some of it's been very poor. Yeah, it's not been great. Yeah, don't recommend.
Hopefully it's just a sign, like it is still new, I think, which is important. So hopefully things they can only improve, I think. And for me now, I haven't watched an awful lot of Celtic Challenge games, so I haven't suffered that kind of bad experience or whatnot. But you'd like to think it's a good starting point that we have it, because for a while there, especially when Hugh and I first started podding, it was hard to watch some games because they just literally were not streamed. So at least now we have a source for this and a place that you can probably watch a game if it hasn't been picked up by a local broadcaster. But yeah, as you said, like obviously they've got work to do. But let's not. Yeah, I suppose the important thing is too where rugby is behind this. So hopefully they take this feedback and certainly improve it. But for me, from the outside looking in, it's good that we have something. But I could imagine if I was watching, I'd be very frustrated with that experience. But fingers crossed. Has it improved actually as the competition's gone on, or has this just been?
So the Scotland home games have been on iPlayer. which has been night and day compared to what Rugby Pass has been churning out. I don't understand why they're not. I know it's great having your own platform and you can control your content, but to not have these games on YouTube feels a bit of a misstep, maybe.
Especially because RugbyPassTV is free anyway.
Yeah, although I suspect they're planning to do paid content at some point, because there's a whole section in the My account for setting up a credit card, which does make me think you're not going to put that in there if you're not planning to use it. But yeah, at the moment, while they are free, it just seems the sevens competition is on there. It used to be on YouTube, and now you're just forcing people to create an account to watch sevens, and or to watch Celtic Challenge, and you've got to sign up to do it. You can't just watch it, which just makes it a bit disappointing, I think. A bit of a misstep. Yeah, people might find it easier to watch on YouTube, especially because you can pair it to the telly, stuff like that. It's easy to watch, I don't know if Rugby Pass TV is a big enough product yet to entice people in to watch it compared to like a YouTube. That's my only break with it.
Yeah, interesting. And as a last point on the Celtic Challenge, as a fellow kit aficionado, what have you made of the kits in the competition? Obviously, the Scottish teams are pretty much the same as their URC counterparts, but a bit more variation in the Welsh and the Irish. So what have you made of those?
I think it's fair to say I'm not a fan. They are. I get where they're trying to go. They're trying to, either join two regions or join two provinces and make it into something. But that yellow and gold, especially, I think it's one of the Welsh teams. It's just horrid, absolutely horrid. Yes, not a fan. They also look like really poor fits. The sort of Harlequin square tops. I don't know who the kit supplier is, but
Canterbury.
Is it Canterbury? They look very poor fits for the girls, where I think the Scottish girls have like female fit kit, which I don't know if the others are.
Well, they should, because the Welsh teams and the Scottish teams are both Macron, so you would think it would be same kind of deal.
Yeah. It's disappointing that the Glasgow and the Edinburgh girls kit's not available to buy, unfortunately. So that's a bit disappointing. But
yeah, same for the Welsh kits as well. We were talking about this on Scarlet's Fever yesterday, and it'd be nice if it was available to buy, definitely. Anyway, last point on Scottish rugby then, before we move on to touching a bit of Champions Cup then. So every time, this is again something I've seen you tweet about, every time the Scotland international team is announced, there's always chat about the eligibility of the players and where these players have come from. Now, this is a topic that we on the Pirate Rugby are don't have much time for people who focus in on this. What's your view on how quote unquote Scottish some of the players are, and does it even matter?
To me, I don't care, as long as they're within World Rugby's eligibility rules. I don't care if it's their granny or their mum or their dad. It doesn't matter. These guys and girls have a choice, and if they don't want to play for Scotland, then that's fine. But for those that do, then they're still putting their bodies on the line for Scotland, for the shirt, all that kind of stuff. I don't think it matters at all to me. Especially for guys who've come from England and things. People move around. From Scotland to England, it's like I could. Newcastle's not even 2 hours away from me, and I think does it make you inherently that different? Probably not. If we see it, especially likes of Hamish Watson's a good example. born in Manchester, only ever came through Scottish Excel's programme, only ever wanted to play for Scotland. I think it's his name is Hamish.
Yeah.
Wasn't interested in, although he could have probably went down the road and played for England, chose not to. So I don't, if you're seeing him as less Scottish, for want of a better word, than a guy who just happens to be born, 2 hours up the road, I think that's a really weird outlook to have. Yeah. But even Duhan, we've seen him. You may have seen him talking a couple of times now about how it was Edinburgh that gave him his club career back after a poor time at Montpellier, and Edinburgh took a chance on him, and if it wasn't for Richard Cockrell in Edinburgh at the time, he probably wouldn't be playing anymore. And he feels that's playing for Scotland is a great way to pay that back almost. So no, I don't have an issue with it, and it's just really weird to be obsessed about where someone was born.
Yeah,
just weird,
especially in the UK for me, because it's 3 countries, but it's also 1 country. And so it's not the same as like moving from, I don't know, Egypt to France or something. It's you can literally just move house and have crossed a border, but that's literally it. I know like there's 1 or 2 different laws between the 3 nations, but very minor stuff. It's not like you need a passport to go across the border. It's not like you can literally just get a job, like you said, an hour and a half down the road and technically be in another country. And you can have someone who was born and grew up in England and their identity being like, no, I am Scottish or I am Welsh, and that be unequivocal. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's generally like it's not a very productive conversation to have anywhere, but I think in the UK especially, it's just a bit daft, to be honest. Yeah. Right. Okay. Let's talk about some rugby matches then. So champions. So the pool stages of the European Cup is over. Cups are over. I'm going to float this out there, and I'll get your thoughts. I'll start with Ender. Is it too much rugby? There's 42 teams now playing in Europe. Is it too many teams? Is it too many rugby matches for one person to watch?
Definitely is. Do I like it though? I kind of do. But yeah, it's too many games. I don't like the format. I do like the inclusion of South African teams. I just think it should be more of an elite competition. That's all I was saying. Like there are too many games. It's so hard. Like what were there? 12 Investec Champions Cup games this weekend, and then 9 Challenge Cup games. Like it's impossible. Well, you can, but it's quite difficult for somebody who has a life outside of rugby to watch all of those games and to have all those subscriptions. And just for me, going up, watching the Munsters and Leinsters of this world win European Cups, it was just felt so much more elite back then. And if you lost the game, you were almost, that was it, whereas now you'll see a lot of teams getting through to the final 16 or whatever the hell it is, with a couple of losses. I just don't think it's that elite anymore. Yeah, what's your take on it, Leslie?
It's too much rugby. It just feels like the World Cup was yesterday, and we were right into Europe again. We also hear an awful lot around, we want to look after players and player welfare, but we're happy to flog players from URC and then World Cup to Europe, and then they're back into Six Nations, and most of them will have had very little break in that time. And the pools are quite big, as you say. I think you could make them a little bit smaller. People have slightly less game time, make it a bit more of a competition. It just, especially this year with it being a World Cup year, it just feels a lot. And it's a lot for us watching. I can't imagine if you're a player who's played, if you're a South African player and you've played the World Cup right to the very last game, and then you're back to club and then playing Europe, I can imagine that probably feels a lot.
Yeah, and the Rugby Championship before that as well. Like it's it's non-stop.
Yeah, it takes a lot for me to being absolutely rugby addict that I am, for me to like see a game that is on and be like, no, I don't I don't want to watch it. I would like to do something else for a bit. That is saying a lot for me. That's, and not least because to watch the Champions Cup, you've got to use the Discovery Plus app, which I am looking forward to getting rid of. Yeah, for all the people who said bad things about Viaplay, Discovery Plus takes the cake. Anyway, so speaking about some games, so I think the big shock of the weekend was Munster's slipping up at home again. They've had a really poor campaign. I mean, what do we think of Munster at the moment? I mean, they got the huge crowds. They had the lead. They had playing against 14 men, and they've had some, like I said, some just disappointing results this European campaign. They've gotten through to the last 16, but by the skin of their teeth.
I might just touch on that just to start with. Yeah, just you can't ignore the injuries, especially in the second row. It's definitely affected them. Conditions were poor, but one thing I definitely like to highlight is just the quality of Northampton and the quality of English teams. Like so far in the European competition, they've been really good. The Galler Premiership, for a lot of reasons, has been slated in the last couple of seasons, but I think I do watch some Galler Premiership games, and I think it is of an improving quality, and I think that's reflected in some of the results. And like, let's not forget that Northampton also went to Glasgow as well and beat them at home. Like, that never happens. I can't remember before that when the last time it was that Glasgow lost at home. And so I think you have to factor that in as well, especially Finn at number 10. He's really good. So that's one thing to mention. But yeah, I just think for Munster, it's been an interesting season. They've been hammered with injuries. They put in some, like, that performance, I think, away to Toulon was fantastic. That felt like a turning point. But then again, and I think it's something we touched on in the pod as well, like Toulon were extremely poor. So maybe that, covered up a few of the cracks or whatnot. But Leslie, what's your take on, from the outside looking in, on Munster? And I know you got a chance to watch the game. Where do you think it went wrong, and how has their season been for you overall, like, speaking generally?
Certainly, it feels like they've, in a strange way, they've kind of continued where they were at the end of last season, where it was a little bit mixed and you don't really know what Munster are going to turn up almost. I thought they played pretty well, but I don't know if
Yeah, they
it's
weren't
just
overly poor. Like, you can't.
no.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
And I saw some criticism of Jack Crowley, which I thought was pretty unfair. About his game management or words to that effect. And I thought it was pretty unfair. I thought he played pretty well. But as you say, they've been hampered by loads and loads of injuries. Didn't they have like 13 or 15 players or something injured at one point this season? I mean, I don't think many teams would be, playing pretty well with all those injuries. And I think, as you say, Northampton were very good, and they have been playing. I think they're top of the Premiership at the moment.
Yeah.
And they've really kicked on this year, and I wonder if maybe not Munster underestimated them, but maybe weren't expecting it to be quite as tough as it was. I don't know, but yeah, I don't think they have anything to worry about necessarily. I think once they've got people back from injury, they'll be fine, and I think we'll see them, do well towards the end of the season. But this game, I think they were just beaten by the better team on the day.
Yeah. Another team that probably found a game harder than they were expecting would be Toulouse at home to Bath. I think a lot of people were expecting Toulouse to really do what they've done to everybody else and put up again another 50 score, but Bath really made a game of it. And I don't know, Leslie, when do we have to start taking Bath seriously?
I was looking at the game Bath played. They brought their replacements on quite early in the front row. I think it was about a 60-minute mark, and I do wonder if they had maybe just held on another 5 minutes, they may have been able to hold out lose, but yeah, they've been playing really well. They seem to have a new lease of life this season, don't they? Johan van Graan seems to be doing a really good job. Also, they've got some big chaps in the centres, which definitely helps. I think we can take Bath seriously. I think they've been doing really well in the Prem. Have they lost a game yet in this challenge?
A couple, but they would say that the games they've lost is where they've rotated quite heavily.
Yeah, first 20 minutes, I think Toulouse went up, a couple of scores, and I thought, oh, this could be a long day at the office for Bath. But fair play to them, they came back and held on to it for a good old chunk of the game. You would hope, because I think they play each other again. Is that right? Or I'm getting confused.
Not quite yet. I think Toulouse have got Racing and Bath have got Exeter.
So potentially we could see them again.
Yeah.
I think if they played again, you could see a similar score, providing everyone's fit. Yeah, I thought they were great. I thought Toulouse were really great. I wasn't expecting Bath to be as good as they were, but especially because we saw Toulouse last week, giving out a thrashing. But yeah, I think we can take Bath seriously. I think I think they've proven themselves.
A side of Toulouse that we don't see very often as well, having to grit out a win, kind of just edge through it and really, it felt like they were really frustrated at times. It was like because what they do and how they play is so like on the edge. If you're slightly over the edge, then it starts and you can see them getting frustrated. But that star power pulled them through in the end. Unfortunately, an injury to Jelonch, which means he's now out of the Six Nations, which is a big shame.
Just one point.
Go on, mate.
So I just want to make one point on Van Graan as well. I think he's been influential there. Obviously, it does help with the backer, a big strong financial backer behind the team. But what I really like about him is that I listened to an interview that he did recently enough, and he was asked about the salary cap and essentially, whether it's a massive hindrance and whether it should be increased. And his answer was basically it was really interesting. Like, he spoke about his kids and how he wants there to be a future for the game in England, and how he basically, it was so interesting. He was basically arguing for maintaining a low salary cap, from what I could gather anyway, because because of the demise of a couple of clubs in England, and he realized the importance of the salary cap, especially at present in England. And I just thought that was so refreshing. You sometimes hear other coaches like Pat Lam come out and say how it's impacting their recruitment, how they can't retain certain players, and then you have a person like Van Graan with a massive backer, and he's basically saying, well, he understands the reasoning for it. And I think it was just really refreshing to hear him talk about that, because that's obviously a massive talking point in English rugby, is how sustainable is it. And I just think it's great to hear a coach whose team are doing really well at the moment and who has a big financial backer is coming out with that kind of message.
So what other games did we catch then? And did you catch anything extra on top of these?
I watched a lot of these games back. For me, Leinster again. I know you don't like to talk about Leinster too, because they're quite predictable. I thought Leinster again were very impressive away from home. Joe McCarthy at lock is a phenomenal player. He is absolutely enormous. I got to see him in the flesh a couple of weeks ago. He's a big unit. I think it's going to be hard for him not to start for Ireland. And I think that they're really coming together. And yeah, I think it was. I did expect them to win. But I just think they're becoming an even stronger team. I know a lot of people have question marks about them, but for me, I see Leinster as even more dangerous this season, because they're putting such a focus on their defence, and they're playing a little bit more conservatively, I think. And then when they do turn it on, they score some absolute blinders. And one feature of their game I absolutely love this season as well is their counter ruck. They just seem like such a nightmare team to play against, because even if it's just maybe one player they commit to a ruck, that player just makes it a nuisance for the opposition. I just love to see that pressure. Van der Fleer is in great form. There's been a lot of talk about Tadhg Furlong maybe being a bit out of form of late the last couple of months or even in the World Cup, but he's been absolutely phenomenal, I think, the last couple of games, especially in the game in the weekend. But yeah, I think Leinster definitely improved, and I really enjoyed that game. Unfortunately, though, I'm pretty sure they're going to meet Leicester, isn't it? And I know this is probably something we want to discuss. Like, some of these games are going to be kind of boring.
Of the 8 games you've got, the 8 games, I think it's 2 same league clashes and 4 repeats of pool games. So I don't know, Leslie, we talked about the format a bit earlier. Is this it coming back to bite us now? Seeing these repeat matches, seeing these uninteresting. I think Harlequins Glasgow is the only unusual game that we're getting.
Yeah, they've never played each other, I believe. So that should be good. But yes, it's really unfortunate that we're seeing all these games the exact next round, and it's not. I don't think repeat games in itself is an issue, but the closeness is the issue. If it'd been we're seeing the same teams further down the line, I think it would have been such a problem. But because it's the exact next round, it's just a bit deja vu. I did see somebody on Twitter saying that they're probably changing the format next year.
Again.
Again.
Insert not another one GIF here.
Yeah. But I wonder if the format is what it is because, again, it was a World Cup year, and there's a limited number of weekends that rugby can be played without encroaching into club games and Six Nations and all that kind of stuff.
They need to come out and say that then. For me, if it's like it was a World Cup year, so we have to play a different format, because the Rugby Championship has a different format on World Cup years. So why not just say, World Cup years we're going to have different formats to fit it all in. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the Challenge Cup then. So I'll come back to you again, Leslie. Are Benetton favourites for the Challenge Cup?
They've been going well, haven't they? If they're not favourites, they must be pretty close. I can't remember who's dropped down into the Challenge Cup. We've got Connacht as well, haven't they dropped down?
Connacht.
Has Ulster dropped down as well?
And Sale, I think.
Yes, Sale are playing Ospreys.
I noticed there's quite a few URC teams have dropped down, but they've been going so well. Like, I don't see why not. You know, especially the French teams may not be interested now that it's Challenge Cup and not Champions Cup. So we might see their rotated squads, and which might make things a little bit easier for some teams. Yeah, why not? Why not have Benetton win? They were current Rainbow Cup winners, aren't they? Let's
Rainbow Cup winners. Yeah. Still second in the URC. And importantly as well, I think it's important to note, like, Zebra are through as well.
They are.
Huge. Yes. First time both.
Zebra 0 wins last season, now into the knockout rounds of the Challenge Cup, and picking up, I think, 2 or 3 wins. I think they won a game away in France as well, I think, earlier in the pool stage as well, which was pretty remarkable. So fantastic for Italian rugby. I hope they continue to carry on in that vein. Another team that picked up a win, who don't win very often, is Newcastle. Newcastle won away in Montpellier. What a result that is. And very well. I mean, I've watched Newcastle a couple of times, and they've been a tough watch at times, but I'm very happy for them. They're very much fighting for survival in terms of in the Premiership. They not winning many games. But it's fantastic to see. A couple of other bits of news that I wanted to just touch is the Ospreys got a very, very strong win down in South Africa against the Lions that not many people were expecting. And they're now going to be at home against, like I said, Sale for the round of 16, which is great. Obviously, the only Welsh side to progress in Europe so far this season. And a quick shout out to Black Lion as well. I don't know if you guys saw this. 17,000 fans in Tbilisi to watch Black Lion. That is remarkable. For all the excuses that a lot of clubs give all around the world. I'm not picking on any one country or any one club here for not getting fans. Black Lion didn't exist 3 years ago, and now they're getting 17,000 fans in Europe. Like, fair play. and definitely of that alone sends a message to the EPCR saying keep these guys in because they're worth having. So that's fantastic as well. Anyway, I just want to finish on a question from a listener. So Neil McCowan, I hope that's how you say it, Neil. If it's not, I apologize. He was asking us, we know there's a rule in the Champions Cup about South African teams can't host semi-finals in the Champions Cup. Is it the same in the Challenge Cup? So I looked into it a bit, and the rules about the formats for the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup on their websites are copy and paste jobs. So they're exactly the same. The Champions Cup doesn't say explicitly in there, no South African team can host it. It was, I believe, Jake White, the Bulls coach, who came out and told the world that South African teams can't host semi-finals. And we spoke with Maz last week about how that's because they're not stakeholders in the league or the cups yet. They are paying for the privilege to play in them. Now, you'd think if they're playing against other South African teams, maybe they might flex that rule. I don't know. But as far as we can see, it will be the same for the Challenge Cup. So again, if the Sharks or the Cheetahs do make to the semi-finals, it doesn't look like they will be allowed to be home semi-finals. But we'll wait and see. Rugby's not always logical and doesn't always join up the dots like that. So stay tuned. But that's as far as we can tell. No, they can't host a semi-final. Anyway, let's get into our rugby roundup then. So let's start off with the PWR with yourself, Ender.
Yeah, so there was a huge result this past weekend. Gloucester Hartpury beat Saracens 24-15. This was Saracens' first loss so far this season. And the result also means that Gloucester Hartpury are now just 1 point behind Saris, and they have a game in hand. Tigers also got their first win of the season away at Sale and won 22-19. What's going on in the wonderful world of the Pro D? Hugh?
So our Van curse, so they'd been on a bit of a bad run ever since we made a video about them. But it's finally lifted. They had a huge game against Mont de Marsan, who were fourth in the league, and was really nervous. But after a tentative game, they came through 31 points to 15. So they're now back on the horse, hopefully. But there's only 5 points between first and third in the Pro D, and there's a lot of games in that league. So there's a long way to go. Anything can happen, and it probably will. Also, something from our guest last week, Maz, we talked about the names of rugby clubs. So who wants to guess what the name of Montauban on Twitter is? Not Ender, because you can see the notes.
No idea.
So their name on Twitter is USM Sapiac, obviously Montauban, but their handle is at CABCL Rugby, and that's Montauban somehow. There's literally not an M in there. So French in it. Anyway, what about Japan, mate?
The Wild Knights are now 5-5 as they put another 70 points on Honda Heat. Not bad. This weekend was only a half round, so some teams now have games in hand. Then in the English Championship, Ealing haven't played in over a week, so Coventry are still top. After their fourth win on the bounce, this time with a narrow 40 points to 38 win against London Scottish. Elsewhere, there was a big win for Cornish Pirates over Nottingham, with the game ending 41-17. And then in the AIL Division 1A, table toppers Clontarf suffered their first loss of the season, losing by 3 points at home against Lansdowne in a game that finished 29-26. And another big news, Dublin University got their first win of the season as they beat Shannon 38 points to 9. What's going on the Welsh Prem?
So Llandovery are still going strong. They got a win over Abu Vale. They're now 6 points clear with 2 games in hand. Newport have 3 games in hand, down in third. There were 2 games postponed this week due to the weather. I just want to give a quick shout out. If anybody's interested to learn more about the second divisions that we talk about, there's a read on our Substack where we talk about all of the biggest nations, well, most of the biggest nations in world rugby, and where they play the level between URC or Super Rugby, wherever it is they play. So you can learn something hopefully there. Right. Before we do the Rugby TV guide, we alluded to it earlier. Full Contact is breaking tonight, midnight. So from each of you, I'd like to get one prediction for the series. What's one thing that you're expecting from it that's a bold prediction, an unexpected thing that you think what its biggest impact will be, whatever you like?
Leslie, you can take that one. You can go first.
It was really unoriginal, but I know the first episode is meant to focus on Finn Russell, so I think he becomes an even bigger household name. I think he's from a fairly working class kind of background, and I think people will really take to him that don't know him outside rugby. That's my really mild take. I also saw a little clip of Andrew Porter talking about his mental health and things, and I wonder if he might come out of that looking really good.
That's exactly what I was going to mention, Leslie. I think he's going to come across very well. He's not shy in talking about it, so I think that's a really good side to see. So yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting. And I think the cynic in me thinks I won't enjoy the series that much. Just like as you talked about before, Hugh, on Drive to Survive, you weren't a massive fan because you already were an F1 fan. But I'm going to try my best to just buy into it, buy into the hype, buy into the soundtrack, which I know is going to be great. It's made by the same directors as Drive to Survive, so I'm sure that it'll be good. And look, if it gets new fans in, great. But just the one caveat I have is that, you know, the success, I think, of Drive to Survive was a once-off. Like, they've done a similar series for golf, for tennis. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, but let's not be too cynical. It'll be good, but I don't think you mightn't see a massive explosion in the popularity of rugby. But look, if it gets a few more people watching, it'll be great. You, what about you?
Yeah, well, you kind of stole in my hot take after Leslie stole yours. Mine was going to be expect a lot of rugby fans not to like it for exactly those reasons. Same reason Formula One fans didn't like Drive to Survive, which is okay. Like we said, it's aimed at new fans, and that's fine. But expect there to be lots of overdubbed tackle thumping noises. Expect there to be lots of fake commentary over clips of matches that didn't really happen. Maybe clips of matches from like a couple of years ago that they pass off as this year and things like that. Because that's all the things that they do in Drive to Survive. So yeah, and then my only other prediction would be ready for a rugby player who's not famous to be incredibly famous in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, anyway, Ender, that just leaves us with your TV guide for the week.
Yep, so not an awful lot of rugby coming up, but we do have some games. So there is one URC game. The Bulls are hosting the Lions. We do have a full round of Gallagher Premiership games. There are, as of today's date anyway, Tuesday 23rd, there are going to be 3 top 14 games broadcast. That could change. We've got the Celtic Challenge coming up as well. And then also just wanted to touch on a slight bit of news just on Viaplay Extra. That is closing down on the 26th of this month. It is already closed down on Samsung TV Plus. This is all part of the takeover by Premier Sports. So just, yeah, if you are looking for the games, this might lead to more games being shown online on Viaplay's app or on their website, but we'll wait and see. Interestingly enough, like, Premier Sports only have 2 channels in Ireland. So like a lot of weekends, there mightn't be enough. Like for Top 14, for example, I often talk about this, there mightn't be 4 games on, there might only be 1, maybe 2 max, and that's because they've got so many other rights and they're only limited to 2 channels and they don't have a player here. So it will be interesting to see how that develops in the UK once they do complete the takeover. But they are planning on launching their own player, so hopefully that won't be too much of an issue. But yeah, for any Viaplay customers out there, they are closing that channel this week. And then, yeah, one final piece for myself, just tune in on Friday morning to catch our breakfast mini pod, where you'll get the full TV guide, and also keep an eye out on our Twitter page for the full guide as well. And for me, just a final word to Leslie. Thanks a million for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you want to come back. And yeah, you've been brilliant. Thanks a million for coming on.
If anybody wants to buy a candle, where should they go to get it?
Wiccanreach.com is my website. You'll find lots of nice things over there.
Check it out, guys. Okay, thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.